Hello folks and welcome back. I'm really itching now to get this put together so that the triplane actually becomes a triplane, but there's still a few things to do, as is always the case. When you get to 90% done, there's not 10% left. It always feels like there's another 100% left to do. Anyway, I've painted up the wheels. They're not exactly prototypical in that from the photographs they appear to be far more solid green, but I wanted the look of the fresh fabric. Perhaps this plane's had a new fabric covering of the spokes and the mud's already started to splatter up. I quite like that look. So I've done them. I've started sorting out the cabin structure, and I want to really get on to rigging it up and setting all the angles on the wings. But before I do that, I need to actually have a look at the underside and weather it. Because at the moment, if I show you on this wing, at the moment, other than this marking, it's just very plain. And I want to create a little bit of shading, weathering on the ribs to make them stand out a little bit. So before I start looking at locking the upper wings together, I'm still not fully decided on whether I'm going to commit to that. But anyway, I need to spray up the underside, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. Hiya. What I'm going to do is apply some 2mm masking tape to each of the ribs, and then I'm going to give it a very light dusting of grey, not black. I think that might be a bit too harsh, to show up the relief of the undersurface. It's just a subtle weather technique, and really it'll only be visible on low and slow flight pasts of the model, because when are you going to see the underside of this? Not very often, but I'll know it's there, and I just want to complete the process. So this is a low tack tape that I'm using. The 2mm has the other advantage, is it makes the ribs appear a lot finer than the capping strips would suggest, which is a good thing in my view. I've done it on the upper surface when I did the pre-shading, which is very subtly showed through, and I think it'll look nice here as long as I don't overdo it. So the first part of the process involves masking up the ribs, or the capping strips rather, of the ribs. I'll do that on all of the underside wing surfaces, and then if I can rig it up, making no promises, if I can rig it up in the workshop, I'll show you the airbrushing process, because there isn't a lot of room in there, and if you think the dining table gets in a mess, then you should see the workshop. I'm just that sort of person, I can't help it. I see I'm creative rather than methodical. We'll see. Okay, so I'll carry on doing this, and then we'll come back when the spraying process itself begins. Okay then, I think I've just about managed to squeeze in here to show you what I'm going to do. I've propped up the wing at a nice angle. It's easier with this wing, it's not quite as big as the upper wing. I'm going to be using, in terms of an airbrush, it's a Badger 150, bog standard airbrush. There's nothing fancy about it, but I've had this thing about 40 years, and it's certainly going to do the job. I've got the pressure quite low at about 15 psi. I'm using a Bambi compressor. It's one that I got from a school that was selling up some equipment that it didn't use, and I got it at a real bargain. So that's the airbrush. I'm going to use a grey. As I said, I think black would be a bit harsh, and I'm using some engine grey. Hope you can see that. Sometimes, although it's supposed to be airbrush ready, it still needs thinning down with water. We'll see how this goes. I'll add a little bit of paint. And the idea is to have quite a subtle effect. So let's see. Just want the impression of a shadow. The trick with airbrushing that I've discovered is you have to imagine that your wrist is in a cast. You don't move your wrist at all. Because if you do, you change the angle of the spray. I'm going a little bit heavier this area because this is the area the strut comes through. Just a very faint impression is what I'm after. Do you know, I think that's enough. So, come on, let's go for it. If I take this off now, there you go. You can see the effect you get. As I say, it's very subtle. And hopefully, if I can manage to do a controlled, slow fly pass without panicking, you'll see this on the completed model. Come on, that's it. I think that's quite effective. Makes a big difference to the overall look. If I can get in without knocking everything over, you'll probably be able to see it better. There you go. Quite pleased with that. So I'll carry on, do the other side and the other wings, and then we can start thinking about rigging this wing structure up through the cabine. That's the weathering completed now underneath. Enough so that the structure of the ribs show up, I hope. And I've also managed to pick out with some shading the structure of the fuselage and some dirt marks on the underside of the lower axle wing. So there we go. Next step will be to put it all together, see what it looks like. Well, here you go. I couldn't resist it. It's just a mock-up at this stage. But there you go, all three wings. I've got the jig on the end here for getting the angle right. I might set this up maybe tomorrow and set everything. Obviously the cowl needs replacing and or modifying and having the front added on. But there you go. Starting to look the business, I think. I think later on today I'll take the undercarriage off and surround the legs with the cladding that's necessary. Overall, I'm very pleased with that. I think it's got a real presence about it. I can't even fit it onto the kitchen table any more easily. I can just. And the stitching shows up well. I ran some sandpaper over the top to pick out the high points, and I think that looks well. You can see the shadow shading here. Somebody commented they thought it needed another coat of paint. The whole point is I wanted to see them, but never mind. If you've enjoyed this update, please give it a thumbs up. I'm getting very excited now. Still loads to do. I've got to route the cables through from the ailerons. I've got to install the radio gear. I think I'm going to have to make some guns for it because I haven't been able to lay my hands on the kits that were available. I've had a couple of goes, but with no luck, so it looks like I'm going to have to make them. There you go. Hopefully, it'll see the air before the end of the year. Hopefully. Bye now.